Coming up on episode 186 of Wheel Bearings. You took the time to send us questions and comments, so we take the time to answer. We're driving the Hyundai Palisade, Kia Telluride, and we spend a while talking about the Chevrolet Bolt EUV drives that Sam and Rebecca participated in. We also talk about Stellantis considering the Cherokee Nation suggestion that it rename its SUVs. And of course, we head off on a bunch of different tangents. That's all ahead on episode 186 of Wheel Bearings. This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
All right. I kept everybody waiting, so we'll jump into the garage. I just wanted to, one last note on the Tundra that I had, because we talked about it last week. As antique as the Tundra is, well, you weren't on last week, so I came up with a theory for the Tundra. It's entropy-resistant character development. And so the hypothesis is that the longer an automaker keeps a model in production without major changes, the more character it develops.
Oh, I like that. Okay, yeah.
So, and I think that holds true. So I that's a poster child for it, but they're going to replace it with a new Tundra very soon. So I'll be curious to see how that truck turns out.
Okay, cool.
The more I drove it, the more I realized that thing is tight as a drum. It didn't rattle at all over crappy pavement or anything. It's just it felt like it was really well screwed together. And they seem to have the bugs worked out of their 15-year-old truck. So that's good.
Finally got it right, huh?
There you go. Well done, you.
No, I quite liked it. I just think it's expensive.
You build something long enough, and sooner or later, you'll get it right.
Right. That's good stick-to-itiveness. All right. What are the rest of you two driving? Well, Rebecca, you haven't been on in a while.
I know. I'm so sorry to everyone that I missed last week. That was very disappointing for me, and I really wanted to be on it, and especially because I missed our guest. So I actually had an interesting couple of vehicles. I had the 2021 Hyundai Palisade, their large 7-seater, but I also, about 2 weeks ago, I had the 2021 Kia Telluride, which is its sister vehicle. So it was interesting to compare and contrast those two.
Which do you like better?
I feel like that's like picking between children. I can
tell you.
We're forcing you to make the choice.
I can tell you, of my two children, I like the dog best.
Exactly.
Dan knows from where he speaks.
I actually, you know what I like best is the 2021 Alfa Romeo Stelvio that is now sitting in my driveway after much drama.
Congratulations.
The dealership came through.
Did you walk in and be like, do you know who I am?
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, do you not know who?
Do I need to make it rain in here?
Haven't you seen me on CNBC?
Right.
So, and you know what was interesting about this transaction was that I actually did it from home. He actually brought the car to my house. So we did all the paperwork, which was so convenient. And nice. One thing I want to make perfectly clear is that my issues with the dealership was not about haggling. The price was established because I had a special code from Fiat Chrysler, which was lovely, or Stellantis, sorry. And it was more that they tried to change the policy. They tried to not, because Alfa Romeos are selling so well and they only have a certain number of Stelvios. Their argument was, we don't want to hold it over the weekend, but through Saturday. But when you tell me on Friday that you can hold it for 48 hours, I expect you to hold it for 48 hours. And so all of a sudden it was this big sense of urgency that they wanted it to be available for sale on basically like Saturday afternoon.
Well, because they could screw somebody else. They could haggle with someone else and get more profit out of that unit if they screwed you too. They don't care who they screw.
Well, as long as we're on the topic of dealers.
I wasn't sure if it was screwing or not, but okay, good to know.
No, actually,
just get it right off the side of the
But dealers doing nefarious things, and this is why people hate car dealers. My daughter this week finally decided to bite the bullet and buy a new car, replace her 14-year-old Honda Fit, which has been a great car for her.
Yes.
But she decided she wanted something different. And she decided to, she wanted to buy a Toyota 86, and rather than buy a new one, she opted for a used one. She found one with like 27,000 miles on it from a dealer in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about 2 hours away from Ann Arbor, where she lives. And the ad specifically said Toyota certified. It said, and we have a screen grab of the ad. It said Toyota certified, implying that it's a certified pre-owned vehicle. It's gone through the Toyota process, got a warranty and everything. She drove down to Fort Wayne, bought the car, traded in her Fit, drove the 86 back, loves the car. But then she realized she didn't get any documentation saying anything about and I've never bought a CPO car, so I don't know if they actually come with a certificate that says this has been certified by Toyota in this case, and it's gone through the inspection process. So the last 2 days she's been, going back and forth with Toyota. She realized she hadn't gotten anything that actually says it was a certified pre-owned. And so she's been talking to Toyota saying, hey, I think this dealer, might have screwed me on this because, I have no indication that this is, and Toyota, looked and said, it doesn't look like it's gone through our CPO process.
Wow.
Now,
did you pay a premium for that?
Well, granted, the price she paid for it was actually, right in the ballpark, right in the range. We looked on KBB and Edmunds. Okay. It's right in the right range, for a non-CPO car.
Okay.
So, she didn't overpay for it. Say
but
that
they
much.
Advertised it as a CPO.
But they advertised it as a CPO. So, if you're buying a used car, that's supposed to be a certified pre-owned, make sure you double check on it. Make sure that you're actually getting what they're advertising. And in general, when you're buying a used car, it's also a good idea to, have it checked out, spend $100 and have it checked out by a mechanic to make sure that there's nothing, significant wrong with it before you buy.
When I was shopping for E-Class wagons a year ago now,
as one does,
I horribly offended the Mercedes dealer that had the one that I test drove and really liked before I decided I wanted a truck. I was like, I need to get it, checked out. I want to have a pre-purchase inspection. And she was just like, well, I mean, we're the Mercedes dealer. We know these cars. It's like, that's fine. I've owned European cars before. I'm going to get a pre-purchase inspection.
Well, so Nicole had a funny experience shopping with her daughter. Nicole Wakeland, who was a guest a couple weeks ago, she had a funny experience shopping with her daughter this a couple days ago. They went into a dealership and she made the fatal error of, instead of saying Windows sticker, she said, do you have the Monroney?
Oh,
which,
no.
Right, immediately gave her away. And she was like, oh, shoot. But she didn't say anything. And so they went on their test drive. And by the time they got back, they had Googled her and found out exactly who she was and everything. And, she just became a NACTOY juror, which is so great. It's North American Car and Truck of the Year. And so, she's in the news a lot lately and stuff. So she had a very funny story.
Because you need to be like, it's like, that's like a gang. You need to be beat in. So did they give her a deal? Were they like afraid of her then?
Yes, they were afraid of her. Appropriately so. As well they should be.
Good.
But yes.
So
anyway.
Now that we've run off the rails immediately.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the question. Telluride or Palisade?
Yeah. So which is your favorite child?
You know what? I'm still going to go with Palisade.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm going with Telluride. I'm going with Telluride. I love
wise choice.
I love the square. I love the square lights on them. They're so distinctive. The headlamps, they're so distinctive. You know that when a Telluride is coming towards you, you know it. Like actually, I was in mine and I was near a dealership and the guy was moving the Telluride and I kind of I flashed my lights a little bit. And we waved at each other and I thought, oh, isn't that fun? But it's just so distinctive. And I think the Palisade is incredibly handsome. It's a very elegant vehicle, but there's something more approachable about the Telluride, and I don't know, it's a little bit more youthful and rugged, and I just, both vehicles are incredibly good, and so I wouldn't hesitate to recommend either one of them. The price point is very similar. The engine, the 3.8 liter engine, is the same. There's just small differences, but I really think you're just deciding between exterior, because even the interior is very similar. They're so intuitive. The fit, the finish, the features, they're all really, really good. And somebody was at my house yesterday, and he said, "Oh, you're the girl with the cars." I'm like, "Yes, I am." And
let me show you my Monroney.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to come up and see my Monroney? And so he asked me that. So the Palisade was sitting out there, and he said, "What do you think of that?" And I said, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anybody. And, as we've talked about with Hyundai and Kia before, there still is skepticism about these brands. And it's so unfair because they're so good. And I just told him, I said, if you need a 7-seater, this is a vehicle for you. The way that it drives, the way that it handles, I've been going back and forth to storage a lot as I purge my house. And I mean, they carry the size of Japanese apartments. Like, you can put so much stuff in there. It's incredible. So I'm a huge fan. The other thing that was remarkable to me was, even though they don't have running boards, how easy they are to get in and out of. I'm 5 feet tall. I don't say that a lot about a lot of trucks, but I didn't even hesitate. Like, I don't think about getting in and out of them, which tells me that it's very easy to do. And I'm a big fan of both of them.
I mean, I think you kind of have to pick between the more Scandinavian style interior of the Telluride or the sort of more German or English kind of opulent quilt stitched themes in the Palisade, right? That's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, one is definitely more elegant than the other. I mean, I think the Palisade is probably a little bit more elegant than...
No, absolutely. But
yeah,
it's a matter of personal taste, your personal style.
Exactly.
Like you, I kind of veer towards the direction of the Kia. But, not that there's anything wrong with the Palisade. It's just, it's not my personal style. I prefer, the cleaner look, the more restrained look of the Telluride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the Telluride is sort of, that junior, senior in high school kind of coolness. And then the Palisade is, or maybe college is like business school. It's just a little bit, it's a little bit more refined. It's much more understated, although it still is distinctive on the road. Those like yellow rectangular headlamps on the Telluride, I don't think there's anything else out there like that. That is an aftermarket.
It's the glowing squircles that get you. Mm-hmm. I got it.
It is. Yeah. It's the glowing squircles.
All right. Well, I mean, in terms of capability and everything, like, I think you're right. They're kind of, it's interesting that you had them back to back, because they're kind of really sort of two different preparations of the same ingredients.
They are. Well, and I actually had the Volvo S90 in the middle.
Oh. So that's an interesting thing, because that one of the things that I thought about with the Telluride was, this feels very Volvo-like in its atmosphere inside, especially, but it's definitely not Volvo price.
No,
it's hard to tell, though. That's the thing. It does the same thing that the Volvo does to a certain degree, where it looks and feels premium no matter what it costs.
Yep, very much so. I mean, what was stunning to me also about the Volvo was how much it held. Like, I went to storage with that thing, and I have a picture of it that I'll put on the Slack. It held a lot, but no, I mean, the price point on the Volvo, I believe, was in about 55, and the Palisade and the Telluride clock in max at like 48, 49. And you're just getting so much for that car. But they're two completely different experiences, of course. I mean, the Volvo, is a sedan. It's a beautiful, large 4-door sedan. Very elegant, very capable, almost like a limo sort of feel to it. Very long, beautiful lines, but it's not the same. So, from a capacity standpoint and such, I mean, the Volvo, one of the things that was remarkable about the Volvo, considering their reputation for safety, and I have a picture of this, and I'm curious to see if other people have experienced this. In the back, in the second row of the Volvo, the middle, the armrest that comes up and down, like you can put it up for 5 people if you have a fifth person, and you put it down. When it's up, it almost completely obscures the view from the rearview mirror.
And this is why all cars should have the digital camera mirrors.
They should, but shockingly so. I was really taken aback because I thought it was directly in my line of sight for my rearview mirror. Uh-huh. And I ended up putting it down for the whole week because it was so intrusive. And I just was very surprised by that because it's almost like it's almost like it has its own extra headrest for safety. And I guess maybe if somebody's sitting there, their head would obscure the line of sight anyway. But
when you don't have any passengers in the back seat, you want a clear view if you can have it.
Right.
And that's the beauty of the camera mirror systems.
Yes.
Is that it's on the outside, it's unobstructed.
Yes, I absolutely love the camera system. And if people don't know what we're talking about, I've experienced it in GM products.
Yeah,
but Land Rover has it.
Yeah, there's a few manufacturers doing it now.
Right.
And so go ahead.
Well, it's cool because from your rearview mirror, you can just flick the mirror. There's a little button underneath it, and it actually doesn't show the interior of the car. So if you have people in the back seat, like little kids, they will disappear. But it shows the exterior of the car. It activates the camera that's outside the car. What it's ideal for is if you have packed your car to capacity, you've packed your SUV or whatever, and you can't see out your rearview mirror, you can flick this little switch and it shows the road behind you using the exterior camera. And I thought that was really cool. Is that a good explanation, Sam?
Yeah. Well, I would add to that, even if you haven't packed your vehicle, even if it's empty, especially in SUVs, you often, you've got a lot of pillars, you've got a lot of, often a long distance to the back. And, if you may have 2 or 3 rows of seats behind you with headrests, and those things block the view. And, having the camera on the outside that gives you a completely unobstructed view. And the other thing too is, on a truck or an SUV where you're also sitting up higher.
Yes.
Even if you don't have anything directly blocking your view on the inside, you still can't, the lowest part of the glass, is usually, 4, maybe 5 feet off the ground. And, if there's anything directly behind you, you cannot see it. And those cameras will give you a view, a much more comprehensive view of what's behind you. So it's much better for safety.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love those cameras. I've heard some people say that they have a hard time with them, that they can't get used to them. When I was on the GMC Sierra pickup truck drive, which was now like 2018 or 19, I got used to it right away. It didn't even, and once it was on, I never turned it off again. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I didn't have anything in the pickup bed, but it was great.
I have trouble focusing. I have to practice more with them. I think it's just it's not the same as a prismatic mirror, right?
Your focus does change a little bit, because when you're looking at an optical mirror, your eyes are actually focusing on what's the distance behind you. So you're focusing at a farther distance away. As opposed to when you're looking at a display, your eyes are focusing on that display. So it's a shorter focusing distance. So it does take a little bit of adjustment, but I think once you drive it for a while, I mean, I know it didn't take me long to get used to it. And, jumping back and forth between cars, I've never I don't have a problem with it anymore. Like, right now I've got an Escalade in the driveway, and then, last week you and I, Rebecca, both drove the Bolt EUV, and I don't know about yours, but mine had the camera mirror in it.
Yes. Yep. Mine had it as well. Yeah.
Well,
and it's great. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Bolt EUV.
Okay.
Other than so it's a bigger Bolt, but it's not actually bigger. And
it is. It's 6 inches longer than the regular Bolt.
But where is that 6 inches? It's in the rear
split,
legroom, right?
So you got 3 inches additional wheelbase and then 3 more inches behind the rear axle. So you got a full 3 inches of extra legroom in the back, and then a little more space behind the back seat as well. But like height and width, it's the same as the regular Bolt. So it has the same frontal area as a Bolt. But it's just it's basically just stretched. And the styling is, the design is slightly different, and the fascia is slightly different from the Bolt. And the way I described it in my write up on Forbes is, it looks kind of like a mini Blazer. It's got a lot of the same styling cues as the Blazer. So you have the slim horizontal daylight running lamps across the top edge, and then the headlights are down below. And then, the side profile of the glass, it sweeps up at the back, and you have that little black trim in the C-pillar. So it kind of looks like a mini Blazer. And size-wise, it slots in almost directly in between the Trax and the Trailblazer in terms of size. So it's slightly smaller than a Trailblazer, larger than a Trax, but it's a little bit lower than both of them.
I was going to say without the ride height, though.
Without the ride height, yeah.
Because it's a hatchback.
Yeah, it's a hatchback.
It's a hatch.
But it's it's a tall hatch. The Bolt has always been proportionately a relatively tall car. Compared to a Sonic, which would be the closest gas engine vehicle in the GM lineup. It's tall. It's always been taller than the Sonic, and it's a little bit wider. So. It is a bit roomier.
It is. So one of the things, and I don't mean to just jump right into the negative, because I think I love the fact that they brought this vehicle out. I don't think that there's enough differentiation between the Bolt and the EUV. I mean, when we looked at it, like at one point, even the Chevy person walked over to the Bolt and not the EUV. It was so similar. But one of the things that I noticed, and I apologize, I don't know why all of a sudden my computer's freaking out here. One of the things I noticed was that there was not that really engaging torque to when driving the vehicle. Did you have that? I didn't feel like I was getting instant torque from this thing.
Did you put it in sport mode? Or even in regular mode? Yeah, I got plenty of torque right off the line.
Did you really?
Maybe you've just been spoiled.
Maybe I have been spoiled by the Mach-E, because it was not the same.
No, it's definitely not. It's not the same. It's not in the same league as the Mach-E. But
right,
the Mach-E all-wheel drive, it's like 360 horsepower, and this is 200.
Okay, so this is what's interesting, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, because I think I know I make the misconception that all EVs have really good torque, but it does get back to horsepower.
Well, I mean, they all have good torque. They all develop their peak torque right from 0 RPM, but that doesn't mean that they all have the same amount of torque.
Right. Okay. Because I found it really sloggy. I was disappointed.
Okay.
You're a lead foot.
Yeah.
That's what.
Isn't sloggy an acceptable term?
That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. The Bolt has 260 foot-pounds of torque. The Mach-E, I think, is about, the all-wheel drive is somewhere around 400. So again, it's like 50 or almost double the torque.
And so what causes that difference? And I know it's a very remedial question, but
different
as we all know, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. I mean, the Mach-E's, the ones that you and I both drove, are dual motor. So there's an electric motor in the front axle and another larger one in the rear axle.
Okay.
And they're bigger motors. So, it's just like an engine, depending how much, if you got a bigger engine, it's going to generally produce more power. If you have a bigger motor, you're going to be able to get more power and torque out of it.
Got it. Okay. So
more windings, more copper, more magnets.
So that was, one of the benefits of driving an electric vehicle, because that's what we haven't really done as an industry, is show people why this is better than an internal combustion engine, is the torque. And I wanted more response from the Bolt EUV than was there. And it could be, as you say, I'm sure it is. It's the foot-pounds of torque. It's the lack of, it's a very different vehicle than the Mach-E. But it did a lot of things really well, though. It was quiet. It was refined. I mean, so over surface roads and different roads and stuff, I thought it did a good job. I wanted more oomph.
Yeah. Well, nothing wrong with a desire for more oomph. But
I think the perfect analog for it is that's about the same amount of power it would have if it were powered by, like a turbo gas engine, like your industry standard 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
It would have about the same amount of power. So
actually a little less than that, more like a 1.6.
Yeah.
Like the Hyundai Kia 1.6, like in a Veloster N or, a lot of those cars, 1.6 turbos are usually right around 200 horsepower, 250 foot-pounds of torque. That's about what this thing does. I just pulled up the Mach-E tech specs. Yeah, it's 200 all-wheel drive is 346 horsepower and 428 foot-pounds of torque. So it's nearly double the torque.
Yeah.
But I think too, some of it is just the character of the vehicle too. The Bolt EUV is not meant to drive with the same joie de vivre of the Mach-E.
Maybe a suit.
It's supposed to be just it's a real, the thing about the Bolt and the Bolt EUV that almost hurts it is that it's such a normal experience. It doesn't try to call that much attention to its electric powertrain. It tries to be a normal car, No,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It does try and be a normal car. Now, with that being said, I did really enjoy using Super Cruise, which was my first experience with Super Cruise.
Oh, really?
So, first time. Yeah.
Okay.
So
it's and the difference between Super Cruise here and in the Cadillacs is that this just doesn't have the bumpy seat, right?
Compared to the CT6, which is no longer in production.
Is that the technical term, the bumpy seat?
Yes.
The bumpy seat, yeah, it's sloggy.
It doesn't have the rumble seat. But otherwise, it's the exact same system that was in the CT6. The new Cadillacs, and the other stuff that's coming out this year. So the Escalade, they're going to start shipping Super Cruise in the next couple of weeks, and the CT5 and CT4 are getting it, and a whole bunch of other GM vehicles. They have the second generation Super Cruise, which is more capable and adds things like auto lane change and various other features.
So we should explain what Super Cruise is.
So Super Cruise is the hands-free driving assist system that GM offers.
It is not the self-driving.
It is right.
It is not self-driving.
I can't even
There
make
are
jokes
no
about that.
self-driving cars available for sale anywhere in the world today.
Any self-driving cars?
Honda,
None?
Was
Zero.
it Honda that Honda has a level 3 system?
Yes, I saw that.
I saw that today. I was like, wow, that's
but
cool.
even that's not really, it's conditional automation. It's not self-driving.
Right. And, but like level 3, I was shocked to see level 3. That's all. But I haven't read enough about it. So
yeah, so it's a driver assist system. It combines lane centering, adaptive cruise control, and hands-free capability. And the way it does that, there's a driver monitor system. There's a little infrared camera that sits on top of the steering column that looks at the driver, and looks for your eye gaze and your head position to make sure that you're still watching the road. Because you have to be paying attention and ready to take the wheel at any time. Now, Grant, I said that this is the same system as on the CT6, but there actually have been some improvements compared to the last CT6 I drove. And I don't know if these improvements ever got into the CT6 or not before it went out of production, because it's been a couple of years since I drove one. But one of the things that it does now that it didn't do, that the last Cadillac I drove with it didn't have, if you were, on a highway and your lane was ending, it knows that the lane is coming to an end, and it actually gives you an alert now saying lane ending, move left or move right. Like if it was an exit only lane that you were in, it would tell you to move left. So it actually gives you that alert now. Whereas before, when I drove the Cadillac before, you had to be watching. You had to pay if you didn't, pay attention and the lane came to an end, the system, would just disengage. It wouldn't give you that alert ahead of time.
So we had some interesting experiences, and we drove pre-production models. People should know. So these are vehicles. Actually, ours were pre-production. So they're never going to be for sale. You're never going to see these cars. This particular exact vehicle. So these were pre-production, and so they were still getting over-the-air updates. Even that morning, they were getting some more software updates and such. So we had a couple of instances I did where the Super Cruise just disengaged. It just all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, I have to take over now. And it's not that it does it and doesn't tell you. There's the bar on the steering wheel goes from green to bright red and starts flashing at you and such. But what was interesting was I was in New Jersey when we were doing this, and we drove by a Nabisco plant that my dad actually used to go to when he was developing products as a consultant for Nabisco. So I noticed it on the road, and then I lost Super Cruise shortly thereafter. Like,
were you
I could
looking
still see
at the
it.
plant while you were driving past it?
I looked over, but I didn't stare at it. Like, I glanced over to it,
okay,
and then went back. But that's an interesting observation, though, because do you think that's why I lost it?
Yeah, if you look away from the road for more than about, at highway speeds, like at 70 miles an hour, if you look away for more than about 3 or 4 seconds, that's when it'll start to give you the alert and start to disengage.
I would be surprised if I would do that, only because I feel like I wouldn't. That's not my habit, and I didn't drive Super Cruise long enough, because that's a long time to not be looking at the road.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Like, that's a really long time. Maybe it was because I looked away a couple of times, because I did look at it. I did look.
Yeah,
I noticed it.
Go turn around and get yourself some like Nilla wafers or something.
Oh my gosh! He used to bring home. So they would. So my dad had a very interesting job, and we're totally digressing. But he worked for a company that did flame treatment and flame burners on commercial products. And so I actually met the interior designer for the Pontiac Fiero when I was a kid, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because he was doing some kind of molding plastics or something. Just anything with heat.
Fiero was pretty familiar with flame treatment,
right?
But usually after production. But when it was in the field.
Gosh, that's terrible. So my dad brought some, designer guy there.
Brought home a flaming Fiero?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, back to the cookies. So Nabisco would actually, the ovens would be running for him to test and see how they were responding and see how the product was coming out. So he used to bring home like freshly baked cookies.
Oh my God.
That were ridiculous. And then
fresh Nabisco must be better than like the stuff you get in the store.
It is better. It ruined me. And then I used to go to the baking show in Las Vegas. And you walk into the baking show at the convention center, and like Au Bon Pain is there, and they have these huge ovens, and it smells like a freaking bakery.
Right? Yeah.
So anyway, Sam, that's a really interesting observation, because then when we got back to base, which is an airport, a little private airport, I was talking to Jeremy Short, the engineer on our trip, and I mentioned because we had kind of compared notes in the first leg, and I said that I was losing Super Cruise at different points, and I wanted it to let me know in a more aggressive fashion than it was doing. So all of a sudden I just wouldn't have Super Cruise. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said that shouldn't really happen. So then on the second leg, I tried to be a little bit more observant as to where it was happening. And then it just happened to be like right after the Nabisco plant. But I do wonder if it is because I certainly caught my eye as we were approaching it. We were probably going 45. It caught my eye for sure. And then I looked again because I was like, oh my gosh, that's the Nabisco plant that my dad would have gone to. And so I do wonder if it was because I probably looked 3 times in a relatively short amount of time.
I mean, there are a couple of other things that could be, what did the lane markings look like? Were they faded?
No, they weren't.
Okay.
It was a 2-lane road with 2 lanes in each direction with a barrier in the middle.
Right. What about, was there a highway interchange coming up there? Because that's the other thing too, that it does now, when you're approaching a highway interchange, it will disengage at that point, until you get past the interchange.
No, this was almost like a post road or Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think in Detroit, like Telegraph. It wasn't as busy as Telegraph. So the entrances and exits, there's a lot of like big box stores along the way and such, but there wasn't anything significant. So Jeremy did not lose Super Cruise at that point.
Okay.
Maybe there
was something obstructing your camera. Maybe one of the cameras
because then I was able to activate it again. Mm-hmm. So it was just what I found challenging was knowing when it was available, because we were actually on radios with him. It was a lead follow.
Yeah.
So he would tell us, you can activate Super Cruise. And then also the steering wheel would turn green.
Right.
And so then I knew that then I had the opportunity to use it. But it didn't ever tell me when it was ending. That was always a surprise.
Well, and this is a problem with that, right? Like the systems, because you've got to be ready to take over, or there's kind of no point in having the automated driving, because human nature is you're going to tune out.
Right. And this is the fundamental problem with these kinds of systems is
with level 3.
Well, level 2 or 3. I mean, this is a level 2 system. Your humans are bad at supervising automated systems. When it works, when something works most of the time, you quickly become very comfortable with it. And then you stop paying as much attention as you should, which is why they have that driver monitor system in there, that is watching you. It is, when it detects that you're not paying attention, then it alerts you and it'll start to deactivate the system, and it won't let you activate it. But, in general, anytime that there's human supervision, what it should be is the automation supervising the human and stepping in if the human is doing something wrong. Not the other way around. Having the human supervise the automation is always a bad idea.
So a couple things. So why is this not a level 3? It drives itself.
Level 3, a level 3 system. Level 2. Let me step back a little bit. Yeah. So you get the idea of hands on, eyes on, brain on. Okay. At level 1, your hands on, eyes on. Okay. And so your hands are on the wheel, your eyes are on the road.
And ideally your brain is too?
Ideally your brain is on.
Okay.
Level 2.
That's going to be a problem.
Or actually 2+ in this case is where you go hands off, but your eyes on and your brain are still on. Okay. Level 3 allows you to go hands off, but you don't have to watch the road under certain conditions. So it can operate without, but you do have to be brain on. So you can't take a nap. You do have to be available. You have to be ready to take over, when it gets to certain points, or if it can't handle certain conditions, but you don't have to be watching the road all the time. So you could be looking at the screen. You could be, texting or something, and not watching the road constantly. Because you have to watch the road, it's a level 2 system.
Okay. Because I know Google had said that they were having problems with their engineers, where their engineers were falling asleep when they were in the level 3 mode, and they weren't.
It was working well. Actually, what Google was doing was actually still a level 2 system. It wasn't even a level. They weren't even doing level 3. They were trying to do level 2 like this. And they found that the system worked well enough that people would quickly become comfortable with it and would not pay attention sufficiently that they would be ready to take over.
Right.
And this is the fundamental problem with any of these kinds of systems where it's got just enough automation to get you into trouble if you're not careful.
Well, and now one of the things that they're running into issues with is when people are wearing masks in their car, that can sometimes interfere with really effective monitoring. I think I mentioned
I actually had a call the other day with the CEO of Seeing Machines, which is
cool.
the Australian company that actually makes the driver monitor system that GM uses, and BMW uses it, and some other companies are going to be using it as well. And they're not really looking at your lower face; they're looking at the head pose, the head position, and the eyes. So as long as you can see the eyes.
Right. But so other systems are looking at the entire face. And those are the ones that are having issues because GM actually Chevy had us remove our masks in the car. And I asked the question, I said, is it to help the monitoring? And they said, yes.
Okay.
So, but I do know other systems like Drive, which is based in New York here, they have dots all over the face. And so, I think different systems are doing different things with it, but the ones where it's a full face that they're monitoring, because they are monitoring, Drive actually does monitor lips and function, and they do more the lower face. So I could definitely see where masks were going to be the issue there. And then some masks, on my small face, some masks go really, like I actually have to physically pull it down away from, not only because my glasses are big, but some masks cover my entire face. So like they probably go up to my eyelashes.
You need kids' masks.
Yeah, exactly. But it's but people with smaller faces, I could see where there could actually be some issue there. So I think it depends on the circumstances. But overall, though, I thought Super Cruise, I could imagine it helping certainly on long drives, and for truckers. Commercial space, there's so much opportunity for commercial space, I think, for these kinds of applications.
Yeah. I think my experience with Super Cruise now over several different times using it is that within the scope of what it's designed to do, it works really, really well. It does it better than any other system out there, including Autopilot. It is more limited in scope than what Autopilot is allowed to do, but within that scope, it does it better. It has a better driver monitor system. It does a great job of staying in the lane and everything and detecting cut-ins because they've got 4 corner radars, so they've got front corner radars. So if somebody's trying to cut in front of you, it'll pick that up very quickly and back off. So it's definitely works really well. But, my issue is, as I said, with the fundamental concept, not just GM, but, all the companies doing this. And, this summer it's going to be on the Mach-E and the F-150, the same type of system. It's coming on the Nissan Ariya later this year with the version 2 of Pro Pilot Assist. Other manufacturers are doing it. And, what I found, right from the first time I drove it, on the original launch drive of the CT6 with Super Cruise, was that it reduces the driver workload, some of the traditional driver workloads, but it creates new cognitive loads that you didn't have before, because you have to stay alert without being as engaged in the driving task.
Right, and that's exactly the challenge that I have a really hard time squaring, is if it's going to do the thing and I'm going to still have to actively pay attention, I don't want it to do the thing because it's impossible to actually pay attention. And we've seen that. Like we see people with dynamic cruise control, not even level 2. I see a lot of them on their phones.
Try doing it over a 450-mile drive.
Yeah, you're just going to tune out. You're just going to be like, thing seems to have it.
Yeah.
Fine. This is why cars need to be simpler and have less of this stuff in it and way more terrifying. So lots of horsepower, tiny, tiny tires, so very little traction. awful chassis balance. We should all drive 427 Cobras.
Who are you?
No, but I'm serious. It's almost like why people like riding motorcycles, because it forces you to concentrate. And it's that important. Like, I know in a lot of places there's no other way to get around than the car, and driving to me is an active, thing that I enjoy. It's the most complex task I generally take on a daily basis. And I like that. Other people, it's a chore, so they want it automated. But the problem is that when you automate it so well, even when it's not full automation, it lulls you into
a false sense of security.
Yeah, you kind of ignore it. And then they've got to figure out how to transition you back to paying attention, figuring out what's going on. Why is the system telling me there's an issue? What do I have to do here? And you're traveling, at 60 miles an hour, you're going a mile every minute. So you're like, that's a lot of feet per second. I forget how many it is, but it's enough. It's like 500 feet per second.
No. Yeah, 32.2 feet per second, I think.
Okay, 500 feet per second. Stupid ass. That's why.
No, I get that, but I think that one of the challenges is that we don't necessarily know the optimal times to use this.
Yeah, like Sam said though, like
never.
The system should monitor the driver and assist the driver when there's an issue versus the system taking over. And so it's almost like this is a parlor trick that got out of hand.
Yeah, like what stability control does, what Toyota's doing with their Guardian system, which is using the same types of sensors, the automated driving sensors, to detect, when the vehicle is getting into a situation, where the driver is not responding correctly, then intervening, so having the automation supervise the human instead of the other way around.
So does Super Cruise, and we didn't have this opportunity, is it like the Audi traffic assist? Like, can you use it in traffic?
Yeah, you can use it in traffic. I did. So,
I think that's, if it can be used to prevent annoying things like fender benders and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's
it's great for that.
There are times and places for this, where if I know, like even earlier this evening on I-95, for whatever reason, there was a lot of traffic. It probably was a leftover accident, in the residual, because we were kind of going waves. So that would have been really convenient, because all of a sudden we were stopping, and then all of a sudden we would be going up to 60, for a short period of time. And then all of a sudden we were stopping again. And it was just,
and it actually is, it actually is really nice in scenarios like that. The last time I drove a CT6 with Super Cruise, I was in California, in Northern California. And, I was driving back from Petaluma, back down to, San Jose, and I drove over the Bay Bridge, and as I was approaching the Bay Bridge, I was hands off the entire time, coming onto the Bay Bridge, and all the way across the Bay Bridge until we got to the end of the bridge, and that was the point where I finally had to take over. But early morning, rush hour traffic across the Bay Bridge, it's exactly that. Stop and go. And I just sat there, leaned back, hands on my lap, obviously had to pay attention, but
right. Is that the direction of the toll booth, or was it the other way?
The other way. I can't
remember now. Okay.
Yeah. I think the toll booth is coming back towards the east.
Yes, back towards, because that's the thing too, is that like, how does it handle things? Obviously you have to take over at that point.
Yeah, you definitely have to take over, if you've got to stop for something like that. And it's not going to stop for traffic signals and things like that.
Right.
Which is why you can only use it on divided highways.
Okay. I thought it was a very good system at the price point that this vehicle is. I think the Bolt overall did a lot of things really well. And, I like the fact that that it's already come down to, from a Cadillac all the way down to the Chevy Bolt for availability. Because I do think that there are instances where it can be useful. Yeah. But for day-to-day driving, like if you're just running errands or something, it does seem a little over the top.
Yeah. And, the getting, the price of the Bolt, is another thing. They reduced the price. They're reducing the price of the Bolt for the 2022 models. So the regular Bolt, the base price is going from $37,500 to $32,000, and that includes delivery charge. And for the Bolt EUV, it's $34,000. By comparison, that Mach-E that we were talking about, that was so much more engaging to drive, that all-wheel drive premium extended range Mach-E is $55,000.
I know, but Ford still has federal tax credits, and GM does not.
You're still down 47. You're talking $12,000 more. It's a significantly more expensive vehicle than the Bolt.
It is. Well, and again, I think I was just one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up specifically was because I think I wasn't factoring in enough the size of the motor, the horsepower, things like that. Like I sort of had fallen into this false sense that every electric vehicle had great torque. And the reality is that that's not the case. It has instant torque, but your torque is still limited.
Still limits. Yeah. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
We've got a bunch of questions coming up, but the first news topic and only topic that we really want to hit on
for nearly an hour now. Just talking about the garage.
Well, and I was going to actually mention the Burt. Was it Burt Bacharach? Do you know the way to San Jose?
Yes, it is Burt Bacharach.
Right?
Now I've got that in my head.
That's the second reference to that I've heard this week.
Oh,
really?
Somebody on a podcast brought it up the other day.
Yeah, he was. Prolific.
He certainly was.
My daughter's getting into music, and so I'm torturing her with the original versions of songs. So she really likes the Always Something There to Remind Me.
Oh, yes.
Naked Eyes. But I was like, oh yeah, check this out. Because it was originally a Burt Bacharach song for Dionne Warwick as well. And she was like, that's weird. So, going through his back catalog. Totally off the point, back on track. So the Jeep Cherokee, Grand Cherokee, it was a news item last week that we didn't quite get to, but the Cherokee Nation has suggested that maybe it's time for them to drop the name from their automobile, because that's kind of like, it's like naming your car the I don't know, something else of European descent, like the, it's kind of weird, right? Yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know. There's probably
Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah.
Centurion.
Sorry.
But
Dr. Seuss, that's not right either. Sorry.
I can see how it's offensive to the Cherokee Nation. This is just more of like, hey, yep, you guys once again are stealing our stuff and profiting from it. And last week, FCA and Stellantis had issued some statements that were sensitive. They said, we understand this, and we'll look at it. We're open to conversations and stuff. And just today, Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares said, if there's a problem, we'll solve it. Check out the hook. Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about this is it reminds me of the Land O'Lakes situation where they had a Native American woman on it.
But the Land O'Lakes thing was weird because that the woman that was on the Land O'Lakes packaging was actually painted by a Native American artist.
Well, and there was actually Native Americans that said that they really liked her being on it because they liked the representation of it. And so this is like many of these issues, there's always two sides to it. I suggested...
Not always.
Well, a lot of times there are, but I suggested to Sam that they call it the National Football Team, or the National Washington Football Team, or whatever the.
Yeah, no, they had that. It was like, wasn't it this year? They had it was Washington Football Team.
Yes, the Washington Football Team. So no, I think that it would be. Well, and you know what, Dan, you had made a comment. This is why you like alphanumerics. I can't stand alphanumerics because it doesn't mean anything. A lot of people
that don't like them, right?
And it's funny. One of our former colleagues works for a window company now, and he's like, the name of the door is like XYZ, blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, what's the name of the door? He goes, no, that's the name of the door. And it's like a serial number. So I think that I like to have things that have a name to them, but it's very, very difficult nowadays because people are very aware of implications of that. So it's sort of like when they sign up with a celebrity and then that celebrity is, caught in a different vehicle of a different brand or something. Right. I'm not talking about Will Ferrell at all. But it's
well, so there's the challenge of naming things. And then I think the other challenge that they've got here is the nature of that name and the weight that it carries, the historical weight that it carries, and our reawakening to that history. And so you can on the one hand shrug and say like, why is it all of a sudden offensive? And I think that's less the point. I think it's always
it's not all of a
offensive.
Sudden. And, people have been Native Americans have been offended by the use of these names for a long time. It's just that, only recently has the rest of the population started to come around to the idea that these names are in fact offensive to, the use of these names for commercial reasons or, as a mascot for a sports team, is offensive to people.
Well, I think part of it is it's like without consultation or partnership. So I'm glad that they're saying, let's try to work this out. If there's some kind of compromise, talking about it, opening the dialogue, it's a great step. And I hope that the Cherokee Nation and Stellantis can figure it out because, I'd be pretty upset if somebody named their car the Dan Roth, and I can only imagine what the car would be. But, I'd be like, without telling me, I'd be like, come on now.
Mercedes wagon.
It'd be a reboot of the Volvo 240.
Yeah.
You guys know.
But no, I think it's, I think there's certainly an opportunity for dialogue. And because that when they came up with this name in, what was it, 1970 something?
44 years. So what, 60s, I think.
Yeah, it was the late 60s. It was on the
mid 70s. The Jeep has sold the Cherokee compact SUV since the mid 70s. So the the Grand Cherokee. But, there wasn't a Native American person in the room. Right. Is my point.
Oh, no, right? Absolutely. Right.
That's the thing. And so I think that the opportunity for dialogue is fantastic, and to have that conversation about what that really means. So it would be, I think that people often struggle, people that are not Native American can often struggle with the idea of, this is an iconic name. It's sort of like giving up Wrangler, but it's not. It is different, unless there are, cowboy Wranglers out there that are offended by it. But I think that, it's something that needs to be talked about for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good development. Let's open the dialogue. Let's talk about it. And I want to see what they come up with. I think, and it's, my personality type is one that I like, the alphanumerics, and you would not believe the unbelievable string of just equipment names, like recording gear and stuff. We just you can have entire paragraphs that are very little besides numbers.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug the U47 into the 1272, and then I'm going to run it into the 1176, and we're going to.
Well, I would love to hear from our listeners on this topic. I think I would love to. So please write in on the topic of the Jeep Cherokee and Jeep Grand Cherokee, and what are your thoughts on rebranding?
And do you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see it named?
That is way above my pay grade.
So they had, before they brought the Cherokee, just the plain Cherokee back, they had it called the Liberty, which, I mean, okay, that's at least it's pretty inoffensive. So again, I'm just gonna go for like an alphanumeric. It's like start with a number, because and it's funny too. Like us car geeks, my Grand Cherokee is a WK2, so
maybe just call it the platform. Call it the platform name,
right? We all, that's the mark of the true car geek, right? We all talk about platforms. We don't, and so when you've got a live
most
one,
of the people buying these things are not true car geeks.
No, of course not.
I don't want to buy a Jeep WK2.
I think it'd be interesting to hear from our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
And speaking of,
we heard from them.
Yes, we have a whole bunch of questions and comments that we haven't gotten to. So let's start off with Travis S. And Travis writes, "I'm curious about your thoughts on ease of entry in newer cars." And this, this is something we've talked about before. For you, Rebecca, even though your stature is quite different from Travis's. He says, "I'm a big guy, 6'5" and 350 plus. I feel like entry is getting tighter on new cars. I rarely had any issues with getting in and out of anything that wasn't a Miata. I had an '09 Mazda 3 that I fit in with plenty of room and zero difficulty getting in and out. I replaced it with a 16 Mazda 6, and despite the car being much larger in size, getting in and out was really uncomfortable. The newer Mazda was very narrow between the steering wheel and the B-pillar. I've started shopping again, and so far everything I've looked at is similar. Very tight entry. Is that something you've noticed? I've never seen it mentioned in reviews anywhere, but I've experienced it, and it's taken many cars out of consideration due to how difficult or uncomfortable entry and exit is. Despite my size, I prefer low-riding hatchbacks or can settle for sedans. I have no issue with entry and exit from my wife's Kia Soul, but I could fill a 2-hour podcast with my hatred of that car and the Hyundai Kia dealership experience.
Well, now you have to tell us why you hate the Soul, because I think that's one of the most charming cars on the road.
I love the Soul.
So do I. My random thoughts are that the B-pillar is further forward for easier entry to the back seat or better crash protection, or if your tinfoil hat is handy. They're making it a tighter squeeze into cars to push the ever-increasing number of large people towards SUVs and crossovers. Tinfoil hat off.
I think that the dimension you're probably looking for is the door opening dimensions, right? And
pretty much, yeah.
I don't know if that has, I don't know how easy that is to obtain. Like, that's probably not something that you're going to find in the commonly available, like, Chrome automotive database that every site sort of scrapes for their information when you're car shopping. So you almost have to bring your tape measure. And he's talking about like A pillar to B pillar versus how that's normally measured diagonally. So it's...
I think...
Go ahead.
I mean, my experience with things like this has been and interestingly on Mazdas in particular, has been the slope of the A pillar. That the slope of the A pillar is so dramatic for stylized design. And also and I don't know that this necessarily affects it, but the greenhouse, with how high the belt line is and then how short the windows are, that affects where the seat is, where the seat goes. So,
that affects your visibility and, very
right. But factors. I mean, what's interesting, like even in my brand new Alfa Romeo Stelvio, whose name is Sergio, for obvious reasons. So it was funny. I was talking to one of my girlfriends. I'm like, well, this will motivate me to lose weight because it's actually hard to get out because I feel like, the bolsters on the seats are so high that I kind of have to like squeeze my ass out of there. They actually have an easy exit entry, and Acuras do this as well, where the seat goes back automatically. Yeah. Right. And it is much easier to get in and out of. But
I hate it.
Well, it's funny. I'm getting used to it. But so I think what's interesting about Travis's situation is that I'm just wondering if even if the roof line is a little bit shorter, but the seat, like where the seating position is. I know like one of the reasons that I bought my Buick Encore Coco was because for whatever reason, my mother could get in and out of that easier than any other car that I had. And I do remember we had a Mazda 6 one time and she and I were getting in it and we both bumped our heads on the A pillar.
Yeah, I think Travis is right to a certain degree that they're sort of messing with you, not on purpose to, encourage any kind of lifestyle change, but just they've got X amount of dimensions to play with, and they've got to fit all that stuff and people into that space. So, given the styling that they're trying to achieve and crash safety, like it's kind of a combo of all of that stuff that has wound us up with his impression of tight entry.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I haven't actually measured them, but I would not be surprised if the door aperture, so the actual opening that you go through, has gotten like for a comparably sized car today versus 20 years ago or 25 years ago, if that actual opening has gotten smaller, even for a car that's the same size, because pillars have gotten bigger, and that is primarily for crash safety. You mentioned the higher belt lines, on a lot of cars, and that is partly driven by styling, but also partly driven by crash safety, because cars today, before they can be put on sale, have to go through a whole battery of crash tests, straight on into a cement wall, a small barrier offset test, frontal offset test, side impact tests, hitting a pole, having, the equivalent of a car, ram into the side of it, rear tests. And so all of these things, the structure, particularly the structure around the passenger compartment, has to withstand that impact and, withstand those impacts, and then, the doors be able to open, so you can get out. And, it's remarkable what they've done. Not last year, but in 2019, I went down to Honda's engineering facilities in Ohio, to their crash test facility, and we got to witness a crash test of a Honda Civic. And they did the small offset rigid barrier crash test, which is a particularly brutal test. And it's so they set up a barrier that overlaps 25%, so 1/4 of the way across the width of the car on the driver's side, and they slam into it at 40 miles an hour, or 40 kilometers an hour.
Isn't that one of the most common crashes?
It is. It's a very common crash, because if you think about it, especially, if somebody drifts over the center line, two
they're not using
vehicles
Super
approaching
Cruise.
each other. because they're not using Super Cruise. It drifts over the center line, and glances off. So you have that partial impact. So it's not a full head on, but a partial impact. And that's actually a really, really hard test to pass, and to design a structure that can absorb that energy. So they did this test with a Honda Civic, and the whole front corner of the car was completely destroyed, but the driver's door could still open.
Wow.
Which was remarkable. And these are the kind of standards they have to design to today. So that inherently drives, bigger B pillars, for example, wider B pillars, to have enough structure there to absorb that impact, to withstand that impact. And so, like I said, I can't say for sure that the apertures are smaller, the opening is smaller, but I think that may very well be the case. And so, and then, to what you said, Rebecca, in terms, some of the styling things, the angle of the A pillar, I'm 5'11", and I've had some vehicles where, when I get in, I hit my head on the A pillar, just because of the angle of it. So it's not an uncommon thing.
I think also that the designs for things like safety, they are issues with them are highlighted by people of extreme size, small like me or big like Travis, right? So, they are designed for that medium person. And actually, Jill Simonello, who we should really have on the show because we talk about her a lot, she wrote an article recently talking about how more women tend to die in car accidents. And so they're looking at crash test dummies to see if they're really accommodating a 5'4" average size woman versus a 5'10" average size man well enough. And I know
in Jill's case, a 4'11" woman.
Or in Jill's case, yes, because I feel enormous next to her, which is saying something. but
it's true, and it's been true for a really long time, and that's why the first airbags were fatal, and they're supposed to catch the 200 something pound, 6 foot tall, the average crash test dummy that was.
Right. And they do use different ones. They have like pregnant women, they have children, things like that.
Well, that was something we saw at Honda's facility. They've got some of the latest generation dummies. So they've got a variety of sizes, as you said. Pregnant, simulating pregnant women. Males and females and children of different sizes and ages and shapes that they're using to test these now. But it's a really difficult problem to be able to accommodate all these different variations.
Yes, for sure. So, Travis, we feel your pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Chuck Goolsby writes in, we've all had some variation of Rebecca's dealer experience, which thankfully has been now sorted.
Yes.
I haven't bought a new car from a dealer since 2002, and I imagine I never will again. While I have many of the same reasons to loathe Tesla as you three do, I do not loathe Tesla.
We do not loathe Tesla.
I may loathe Elon Musk, but I do not loathe Tesla.
I don't even loathe Elon Musk.
Anyway,
yeah, well.
But the one thing I've applauded them on since the beginning is their stance of dealerships.
Yeah.
In the age of online shopping, there's really no reason whatsoever to subject oneself to the torture that is retail car buying. It is the only consumer purchase left where the price isn't the price, and the process is needlessly goddamn frustrating. Well,
obviously, he hasn't worked with a contractor lately.
Yeah,
Sorry.
or bought a house.
Or a home. Well, but
dealer franchise laws are as anachronistic as dinosaurs, and therein lies the problem, and should all be flushed from the books. I have not, and I will not ever buy another new car again until I can just order it online and it appears in my driveway a few days later. I don't care if it is Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any other tech zillionaire who makes that happen. Dealers can't die off fast enough.
Tell us how you really feel.
I don't disagree that the dealer experience is a holdover and it's bad and the franchise laws are sort of entrenched. The problem is that those dealer groups are super, super powerful lobbyists and they donate a lot of money to political campaigns, and so they have the ear of the people who can keep them entrenched.
Well, especially local and state legislators, because these are often local businesses that are they do well for themselves, and the dealers get together, they have trade groups, they get together and they lobby extensively to maintain these franchise laws.
And to be fair, dealers are not all bad.
Right.
They're not all awful. There's jobs at dealerships, and there's investment and overhead that they need to take on. The thing that frustrates me about Tesla's experience is their purchase experience seems pretty good, pretty smooth, pretty well thought out.
Their service experience is a whole other issue, though.
Right. And that's probably the most important thing is if you're going to sell a product, you've got to be able to support your customers, and the customer service experience really, especially for a premium product, or if you have a premium experience for a product that's non-premium, like that's going to win you customer loyalty. And they're not advertising. They're not doing a lot of the traditional sales stuff. So at a certain point, Tesla's going to plateau. But beyond that, like, you're not going to get repeat customers if you just make it such a terrible experience to own the thing. If the thing breaks, you know it's a car, it's complex, it's going to break. People can't be without their cars for long stretches of time. Tesla customers can, because it's not their only car usually, and they have situations where their life accommodates that. But somebody buying a $25,000 EV, that's not the case. They have different pressures in their lives, and so they need to be able to have that common dealer service experience at the very least. So that needs to be wrapped up. If you're going to change the sales experience, cool, I'm down. I do not like the sales experience, but I like the fact that I can go to the dealer for my car that's in town a few miles away and get it serviced and know that they know the thing they're looking at and it's going to be fixed.
And if they don't have parts in stock, they can usually get them within a day or two.
Right. So I like that part of it.
Yeah.
I think that the even though I agree with everything you said about the dealer franchise, about the local and state level lobbies and such, the thing though now is the dealer that is willing to evolve, the dealer that is willing to, to automate their processes, to do the no haggle pricing. Even my experience when I said, look, is there any way that you can bring the car here to my home? Because I was going to have to figure out how somebody else was going to have to go to the dealer with me to get me there and then to get me back, because Uber is not really happening right now. Right. So it was a lovely experience to have him come to, we sat outside, we went through all the paperwork, and it was a really positive experience. So the dealers, just look at what Sam said earlier. His daughter was willing to drive 2 hours to get what she wanted. So the dealer that provides that type of service. Also, we're seeing more and more competition on used cars from Carvana, from people that deliver the car to you. So, there is opportunities for dealers to improve on the experience, but they have to take the initiative and they have to do it without needing it to be mandated, competition needs to basically mandate what they do. But there's opportunity there to improve.
And for what it's worth, if there's obviously been a lot of pain over the last year due to the pandemic, but one area that actually has moved forward significantly in the last 12 months is online car buying.
Yes.
Most new car dealers across the United States have, if they didn't already have an online system, they have implemented online systems to go in and shop for a car and do most of the transaction online. And, especially bigger dealers, most bigger dealers are offering, like at-home delivery and things like that, and even pickup for service. So, they'll come and pick up your car and bring it back. So the system is evolving, and now as we get into more and more sales of EVs, manufacturers are working with their dealers. They're getting more involved in moving a lot more of the purchase process online. For the Mach-E, when Ford launched the Mach-E, they did online ordering. Dealers have vehicles in inventory now, so you can go into a dealership and buy one now. But initially, all the orders were done online. You went online, you configured your car, and then you picked a dealer nearby you where you would finish off the transaction and take delivery. GM has said, when they launch the Hummer EV later this year, you will do the entire purchase process online, and the only thing you'll do with the dealer, you'll select a local dealer where you'll take delivery. Everything else, the financing, everything else is going to be done online. Volvo just this week announced the same thing for all their EVs going forward. It's going to be online sales only. And again, you'll finish off, with taking delivery from a local dealer, but the whole purchase process will be done online.
So how does the test drive fit into that?
So for test drives, it'll have to be, working, selecting a dealer, and they can deliver a car to you for a test drive.
Okay.
So I can see how this is unpopular with dealers, given the fact that it upends their ability to
upsell,
sell the car, right? But it turns them into basically just a service center of the parent corporation, and they're not the parent corporation. The dealers are independent corporations, and so I want to know what the negotiations were like for Volvo to be able to do that. Because it's if I'm a car dealer owner, and most owners don't own a single store, they're corporate owners. They own multiple stores. They're ownership groups, and they make millions of dollars on this stuff. To really have their hand forced to shift their business like that has got to be unpopular.
First of all, I think a lot of, like what Sam said, the pandemic forced some of these changes. Yeah, but the consumer is forcing them though too.
Yeah, and the dealers that get it are going to be the ones that win.
Exactly.
That's just good customer service. I don't see why you wouldn't do that, even back in the before times. Just like, yeah, sure, we'll write the loan at your house. That's fine. It doesn't trap you in that F&I office for an hour trying to sell you the
ED insurance,
the ceramic coating or like whatever the crap is. But they probably take a hit on margin, even by just doing that. Like moving away from those aggressive, abusive tactics costs them money. It's one of those things, like the better it is for the consumer, the more pleasant the experience, the less the dealer.
No, I mean, I think that we are looking at the Blockbuster scenario. Like the dealers that cling to the Blockbuster model are going to go out, and the ones that are willing to evolve to say, if this is what you need me to do, let me rethink my whole business then. And maybe, and even the servicing of EVs is different,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so, right. So they have to prepare for and anticipate these kinds of changes.
And this is exactly why, GM, when they announced, the Cadillac Lyriq, they said to their dealers, to all the, there were 850 Cadillac dealers across the United States. They said to the dealers, look, you're going to have to invest, Cadillac is going to go all electric by the end of the decade. You're going to have to invest, in parts and tools and training for your staff. And if you don't want to do that, and it's probably going to cost you about $200,000 to $250,000, to put in chargers and get the specialized tools they need to service EVs. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Tell us now. We will buy back your franchise.
Right.
And, about 150 out of those 850 dealers said, yeah, you know what? We don't sell enough Cadillacs to justify, and most of these, are in smaller dealerships that are also selling other stuff. We don't sell enough Cadillacs a year, to justify that kind of investment. Cut us a check. And, so they GM bought back the franchises for, on average, I think about $500,000 each. And just bottom out, so they won't be selling Cadillacs anymore in the future. And I think we're going to see more of that going forward.
I think so too. That's the kind of those are the kinds of changes that we will see as the industry continues to evolve. And speaking of EVs,
yes. So from Joshua, he said on the most recent episode, we were talking a lot about how many of the manufacturers are going all electric. Talk about this argument that production of these car batteries is worse for the environment than the fossil fuel engines are. I think maybe this used to be true early on. Maybe. What is the case? Can you shed any light on this? Keep the shiny side up. Yes, Joshua, I'll include a link to one example of a life cycle analysis study that was done. There's been many of these done over the last several years that look at the full product life cycle from raw materials to grave, to scrapping the vehicle, and look at the total environmental impact. The reality is that, yes, it does take more energy, more resources to build batteries than it does to build internal combustion engines. And so the energy and emissions from production of an EV is greater than production of an internal combustion vehicle. But once that vehicle is in operation, the reduction, even with coal, but the mix of where electricity is coming from is changing dramatically every year. And it's, coal, is like less than a quarter of our electricity production in the U.S. now. And it's going to continue to decline. Even, natural gas, is going to be declining. So the overall emissions from use of the vehicle, from use of an EV, is so much less, even factoring in power generation, that because one thing that people don't think about is that it actually takes a lot of energy to refine oil as well, and that's there's a lot of emissions and a lot of energy that's used in oil, turning crude oil into gasoline. So those life cycle analysis studies that have been done, on average show roughly about a 40% reduction in total life cycle emissions from an EV, even factoring in the production and recycling, about a 40% reduction in total emissions over the life of the vehicle from cradle to grave. So,
yeah. And so one of the other issues that you have with oil itself too, is like you wind up getting stuff like methane that you can't just capture and use. And you don't want to vent it, you got to flare it, because if it's such a powerful greenhouse gas, you're actually better off. It's
at least an order of magnitude worse as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is.
So the stuff you put in your tank has that ongoing impact. It's not just done at the time of production. That's forever, as you need to fuel your car with petroleum fuels, and then you're burning fuel. So, that's a tough argument though, because it's used in bad faith a lot of times. That the rare earths too, like the mining that goes on for those and where they're produced, and the labor that's used to produce them. Sometimes it's not great.
Yeah,
and it's good to be aware
actually,
of it.
If there's anything that's the real problem, it's some of those raw materials, the mining of those raw materials like cobalt and rare, particularly cobalt. But some of the other materials as well. And, that's something that, manufacturers are working to address by trying to come up with designs that reduce the use of some of those materials. Like the new, GM's new Ultium cells, they reduced the cobalt content by 90%. So there's a lot less cobalt that's going to be used. Other manufacturers are trying to source cobalt from different regions of the world, not from Central Africa, where most of the cobalt has come from so far. So those are issues that need to be addressed. But then again, there's issues with where oil comes from as well.
Yeah, look, anytime there's that kind of industry and opportunity, it's really hard to squeeze out, not even corruption, but just that element of it. It's just shady stuff. It's a circular argument. Like it's almost like vehicular whataboutism. It's like, oh yeah, your car's bad. Oh yeah, your car's worse. Like, come on. Yeah. Like,
all right. So let's finish up the last couple here. I can see Rebecca's fading.
Well, I just realized that I've never turned on my recorder.
Oh, that's all right.
So I'm sorry.
All right. So It's okay.
But how many times did you refill the glass?
I've got a recording going here.
Good, thank you.
So from Joe Canali, I love wheel bearings and I'm a devoted listener. My wife and I love our Telluride, which we added to our consideration based on your review.
Nice.
Now my mother-in-law is looking at the Mazda CX-5, which I feel like I've heard your review, but I cannot find an easy way to search for which podcast would have this. Even on your site, there are like 29 pages, and doing a find per page for CX-5 is painful. What am I doing wrong? Thanks again. Love the show. Joe, if you go to the top of the page, you will find a link there that says search. Click on that link, type in CX-5. You will find all the references to CX-5 from all the pages.
So here's the other thing you can do. You can go to Google and you can write Mazda CX-5 or CX-5, and you can then type site wheelbearings.media, and that will be using the Google search algorithm to search the page versus search the domain versus using whatever we have built into WordPress. Which
that's actually what the search link is doing. Is using Google. It's doing that custom Google search.
I gave you the hard way, but yeah, I mean, and there's tags too, right? Like it's a good reminder though. We should be better about tagging.
I do try to add tags for all the cars we talk about on each episode. But if you look there, and also the other thing that the Google search will do is we've started a while ago putting text transcripts on all the episodes. So it'll search the transcripts as well for references. So if there's anything else you're looking for, that's not in the show notes, it can often find those from the transcripts.
But I can tell you that episode 96, we talked about the 2019 Mazda CX-5.
There you go. I will encourage Joe's mother-in-law to test out the infotainment system on the Mazda CX-5, because that is the one that is not only is it not touchscreen, which I know Sam likes, but it's when you use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, it takes away the organic voice recognition and such of the system. So I just
that's right.
So
I had to say
it's
that.
also very clicky,
if you listen to satellite radio, that may not be the best option for you.
I've actually heard
Otherwise, it's a great car to drive.
Otherwise, it's a great car to drive. It's an absolutely fantastic car to drive. I've actually recently heard a number of people talk about the difficulty that they've had with changing the radio station in the Mazdas with the new infotainment system. But if that is not your jam, like if you don't care about the infotainment system, it's a fantastic car to drive. It's well designed. It's beautiful interior. Had a great time driving it. All that good stuff.
And if you like to have a multitude of voice recognition systems at your disposal, some of the newer vehicles like the Chrysler Pacifica with the 21 Chrysler Pacifica with Uconnect 5 lets you choose from either the native Chrysler voice recognition system, Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, or Siri, depending on which phone you have connected. And same thing true in the Cadillac Escalade I've got in the driveway right now. You can use either one. So
awesome. Let us know if she buys it, Joe.
Yeah. All right. Last one from James Ty. Hi, everyone. After all the discussion on freight charges, I thought you might be interested to know that Ontario has a law that says dealers must advertise a price that includes all fees. Those include freight, PDI, pre-delivery inspection, administrative fees, the OMVIC fee, the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council, a fee we pay to fund the organization that enforces these rules, and an AC tax, so tax for air conditioning. The only things that are not required to be included are sales tax and licensing fee. They're also not. This is interesting. I didn't realize this. They are not allowed to sell for higher than the MSRP price. So no insane dealer markups on hot products. Everything is MSRP at worst. So whatever the advertised price is, that's the only thing they can charge you for. They can't charge you anything extra.
That's so interesting. It's funny to me too, because the housing market is different. When they put out a listing price, that's actually pretty much the minimum. You are expected to get into a bidding war in Canada.
Oh yeah, in Canada, it varies. In some places, that is often the case. It's definitely been the case in California for many years now, and hopefully will be in Connecticut as well for you.
Yeah, but it's fascinating to me that this is really, really interesting that it's MSRP or where so there's no dealer markups are not allowed. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's Canada where the automakers,
they might as well be communists.
Well, no, but they can. It's the North American market, so they can turn around and overcharge us chumps here in the States.
You mean like they do for pharmaceuticals?
To subsidize the Canadian fair pricing. No, I have no idea if that's what happens. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I'm being
But that's very interesting.
For what it's worth, most of the sticker prices are somewhat higher in Canada anyway. So
yes, that's true.
Well, it's metric dollars.
Yeah.
No, James, that's very interesting. Thank you for letting us know about that.
I would love that because that's one of the biggest sources of trepidation when you purchase a car is that the price is not the price. And I think that's why when we get back to stuff like Carvana and CarMax and that experience is the price is clear.
Yeah.
And there's none of that.
Especially for anything that's a mandatory fee like that freight charge. Mm-hmm. If it's something that you can't opt out of, just include it in the price that you advertise. That's right. Simple as that. Right. It's one thing, if you're going to take a flight on Spirit Airlines and, if you want to take a carry-on bag, you got to pay extra. If you want to reserve a seat, you got to pay extra.
Go to the bathroom, bottle of water.
Yeah.
The lesson is don't fly.
You have, as painful as it might be, you can opt out of some of those things, but you can't opt out of the freight charges or PDI fees or, other fees. If you can't opt out of them, just go ahead and bundle it in the price.
It's interesting that they break it all out so you can see what the fees are. I don't think that
here in the States, that's
they don't
good.
tell you what the PDI
But I mean, the price that you
and
advertise should include all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you can see where the money goes.
The level of transparency, I think, is that's my only issue with bundling everything is I want to see what each of these prices are. So we've talked about this before. Like, I think, yes, if they shouldn't be allowed to advertise a price that doesn't include these things, but I also want a level of detail and transparency so I know what each one is.
Yeah. You want the above the line and the below the line.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's producer instinct kicking in. That's good. That's excellent.
All right. And that's all we've got for this week.
Yes.
So let's wind it up. Thanks for listening. If you feel like you enjoyed the show, please go and give us a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or any other place where you can find to rate podcasts and tell your friends about it.
If you feel like you didn't enjoy the show, please send us an email.
Yes.
No, don't.
I think it's important to hear.
Yeah, no, we want constructive feedback.
We do want constructive feedback. That's the difference.
Yes.
Right. Like
for sure.
Codes on my report card in high school. It has potential, doesn't use it. Those things.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for joining us. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Wheel Bearings. Hey, we love to listen to our listeners, too. Drop us an email to feedback@wheelbearings.media with your thoughts, questions, or conversation starters. That's feedback@wheelbearings.media. You can also find us on Twitter @wheelbearingscast. Don't use any vowels except for the A in cast. So that's WHLBRNGS cast. Thanks again. We hope to hear from you soon.